that time of the month again. Actually, I'm kind of overdue, but let's talk about all the 6 books I read in June 2024. If you're new here, hi, I'm Carol and I make videos about books and occasionally also about fashion, and today we're talking about books. And when it comes to books, my top genres for the past couple of years have been romance, lit fic and classics, but in general I do read a little bit of everything. I would say in June it was a little bit of everything. It was quite a balanced month when it comes to, I would say, genres, but also the type of books I've been reading, because there are months that I'm more in the mood to read on my Kindle and there are others where I'm more in the mood to read a physical book. In this month I actually read 3 books on my Kindle and 3 books from my physical TBR. So let's stop rambling and let's start talking about the books. I will be talking about them on the chronological order of when I finished. So the first book I finished reading in June was a classic. It was The Nutcracker. And The Nutcracker, it was originally written by E.T.A. Hoffmann, but throughout the years it had a lot of retellings. One of the most famous one, the one that is considered a classic retelling and the one that inspired a lot of movies and the ballet, was the one by Alexandre Dumas. The edition that I own has both the Alexandre Dumas retelling but also the original version by E.T.A. Hoffmann. I read both of them and personally I prefer the Dumas version, but honestly, that's not very surprising considering Dumas is one of my favorite authors. Everything that I read from him, I loved. Basically, this is a very Christmassy story. This is a story that it is more appropriate for you to read near the Christmas, but I read it way before Christmas and that's fine. You can read it whenever you want. But The Nutcracker, we follow this little girl. She's called Marie. She lives in Germany in, I think it's the 1700s, and her family, she comes from quite a wealthy family in this small town in Germany. And the story takes place on Christmas Eve, and the story basically starts with Marie and her brother going into this big room in their house, and they go to open the Christmas presents with their parents and their godfather. And while they're opening all these luxurious, beautiful presents, Mahi finds this little ugly doll called the Nutcracker, and his job is literally to crack open nuts, and he's quite ugly, as I said before. But Mahi, being a child, she falls in love with this doll, and she grows very attached very fast to this doll. But her brother, he accidentally breaks it, and because Mahi is quite attached already to this toy, she asks her parents to stay up later and stay in this room where they store the toys. But as she's playing with her toy, she thinks she witnessed a war going on between her Nutcracker and the king of the mice. And whether this happens or not, this is for the reader to find out. But overall, this is just a cute story. This is very much a story to tell to kids on Christmas Eve, or if you're an adult and you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend. It's quite cute, it's quite cozy, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Personally, I prefer the Dumas version because I feel like it is more atmospheric than the E.T.A. Hoffmann one, but honestly, it's practically the same story. The bones are the same. There isn't much different between these two stories. I just prefer the Dumas version because I prefer the way he tells a story. So I ended up giving the Nutcracker 4 stars. Also, if you never read the story, if you don't know about the story, I highly recommend to check it out, maybe a movie. There is a Barbie movie, which is actually how I got acquainted with the story, because I watched the Barbie and the Nutcracker when I was a little kid, and I actually had the Barbie and the Nutcracker doll, and I loved that Barbie. Also, I never watched the ballet, but I like the soundtrack that Tchaikovsky composed, and it is one of my favorite background music. So there's that. I feel like going into this book, I already had a feeling I would enjoy just because of who was retelling, but also from the movie and the songs from the ballets. But let's move on to the second book I finished reading in June, which was... Oh, I hate this cover, by the way. This cover, the reason why I hate it is because you look at it and I feel like it tells a completely different story from what is actually inside. The book, which is Vladímír by Julia May Jonas, again I hate this cover. People on cover, real people on cover, can be kind of iffy. It doesn't always work, but I just on a cover it's like, no thank you. But I don't know if they released a new edition. I don't know if it is some kind of new edition or they just changed the cover, but I saw that they released a cover that is this beautiful green, but there is no chest. It's just the green, and the green makes sense. This, it makes zero sense because it gives a different message from what this book is about. But what is Vladímír about? Vladímír follows this college professor. She's a literature professor in this small university in upstate New York, and her husband, who is the chair of the department, he's being investigated because he was having and keeping affairs with his students. And the narrator and her husband, they do have an open marriage, but not everybody knew about that. And our narrator, she is dealing with all the repercussions that her husband's behavior is having on her life and on her mental health. And basically she is in a very chaotic place at the moment. And then during the summer, the college, they hired this man called Vladímír. He's a novelist and he is quite popular. He just released a book that is receiving a lot of critical praise, and his book is very successful. He is receiving prizes and it's really popular at the moment. It's hyped up. Vladímír is also much younger than her, and he is portrayed to be this beautiful man who, I wouldn't say he's vain necessarily, but he definitely likes to dress well. He likes to be well groomed. How do you say this? I think I'll stay here with describing Vladímír. But our narrator, Vladímír, he knocks on her door one day and he's going to deliver his book to her husband, who asks for a copy, but instead who receives him is our narrator. And while they are talking in her living room, they have a moment and she basically develops an obsession with him. And this book, it isn't only about her obsession with him. I would say it's more about the internal turmoil she's going on, but basically that's the premise of this book. I ended up giving Vladímír 4 stars because it's fun. I'm going to turn it because I hate this cover, sorry. But Vladímír, I thought it was a really interesting book. It is not long, but it is impactful, and I like the ending, and that's all I'm going to talk about it. This book will be in a future video that I think will be coming up soon, so I'm going to leave it at that. Let's move on to the third book that I finished in June, and it is From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. If I'm looking down here, it's because I have my little notes with the list of books I read. But the third book I finished reading in June was From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. This is a romance novel, very hyped up on Book Talk, and in classic Mariana Zapata fashion, it is very long, and it is a slow burn. But from Lukov with Love, we follow Jasmine and Ivan. They are figure skaters, and Ivan, he's this Olympic medalist. He's a very successful figure skater. He's also the older brother from Jasmine's best friend. And at the beginning of the book, Ivan, he's in the process of not breaking up, but he is in the process of changing figure skating partners, and he decides to ask Jasmine because Jasmine, she recently parted ways with her former figure skating partners, and we follow them in this slice of life way Mariana Zapata usually writes her books, and we follow them through this period of time as they train to compete and become figure skating partners. I ended up giving this book 5 stars, which was surprising for me because, first of all, From Lukov with Love, it has all the ingredients from a book I really enjoyed, but not of a book that I would give 5 stars. Actually, From Lukov with Love doesn't follow in the thresholds. It doesn't check the boxes I usually check to know a book is a 5 star, but when I was on Goodreads about to read this book, I couldn't give 4 stars. I just couldn't. I like the characters, I think they are endearing, I like the stories, I like their dynamic, the banter, the bickering, because also, I think I forgot to say, but at the beginning of the book, Jasmine and Ivan, they keep bickering. It's kind of adds like to lovers situation, but I also really like the pacing of this novel. I know some people don't really enjoy that, at least on Goodreads. I was looking at some reviews. Some people don't like that because it's quite slow, but it is Mariana Zapata, and I already read quite a few of her books and actually enjoyed all of them so far. But this one, it's my new favorite. I really liked From Lukov. I ended up giving 5 stars, and it's a book I feel like I will read in a few years and hopefully will enjoy again. Now let's move on to the 4th book I finished in June, and this one is one I have been wanting to read for quite some time, and it is Good Girl Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. This is the 2nd book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, and I read the 1st book last year and I really enjoyed that. And I don't know why I waited so long to read this one. And I also really enjoyed Good Girl Bad Blood. I ended up giving it 4 stars, which is the same rating I gave the first one. The reasons why I like this book are the same reasons why I like the first one. I just love the way Holly Jackson writes her novels, how she plots these books. There isn't a plot hole. This book, it's amazing. It is very dynamic. We have regular chapters, no, following the characters, but then we also have, let me find it, we have like internet articles, and then let me see if I find here, oh yeah, like we have some journals that E.T.A is writing, and we have podcast entries. It's just very dynamic and there is no plot hole. I really enjoyed it. One thing to say about this one is that, again, I was looking at Goodreads and I don't know if I'm a minority at that, but I feel like I might be a minority at that, and maybe that's because I read the first one, so I'm already familiar with the way Holly Jackson was writing this book. But I knew who the main villain of the story would be 50% in the book. This didn't necessarily ruin the novel for me. I still wanted to continue reading and figure out what was happening, what was the reason this person was the villain. Also, every time I picked this book up, just like with the first one, I just couldn't put it down. I continued reading because I wanted to find out what would happen next. But yeah, I ended up giving this book 4 stars. In terms of plot, I had no idea going what this book would talk about, but basically, Good Girl Bad Blood, we follow Pippa as she is investigating the disappearance of her best friend's older brother. And that's pretty much it to talk about Good Girl Bad Blood. If you like the first one, I do recommend reading the second one because it's just so fun. It was fun. And that's all I have to say about Good Girl Bad Blood. Let's move on to the 5th book I finished reading in June, and it was Sucker's Portfolio by Vonnegut. This is a book I found on Kindle Unlimited, and it is basically a selection of 7 short stories, including a non-fiction piece by Vonnegut that were previously unpublished. The name of the short stories, let me see, because I wrote it down, and yeah, here. The name of the 7 short stories are, the first one is Between Timid and Timbuktu, the second is called Rome, the third is called Eden by the River, the fourth is Sucker's Portfolio, the fifth is Miss No, You're Fired, the sixth is Paris, France, and the seventh and the non-fiction piece, it is called The Last Tasmanian. I ended up giving this one 3 stars because it was meh. There wasn't a piece that I thought was bad, but there also wasn't a piece that stood out to me. It was very meh. I don't foresee myself rereading this book, so I ended up giving Sucker's Portfolio 3 stars. But if you're looking for a collection of short stories, maybe give it a try, especially if you have Kindle Unlimited. Now let's move on to the last book I finished reading in June, and that was The Long Game by Elena Armas. This is a rom-com, and it is kind of adds like to lovers. So in this book we follow Adeline and Cameron. Adeline, I think she's the PR of this soccer team in Miami. The soccer team is owned by her father, but she has an interesting relationship with her father. And basically she gets in a PR nightmare. She ends up being the star in a scandal involving the mascot of the team, and her father, as a form of punishing her, sends her to this very small town, countryside little town, for her to complete an assignment that at first she has no idea what it is, but basically her assignment is to run the small little league team, which is a team for 6 to 8, 9-year-old girls. And in this little town, she meets Cameron. She meets him because she basically almost runs him over with her car. But Cameron, he is her neighbor, but also he's a retired star goaltender, a soccer goaltender. And they don't start as the best of friends. There is a little bit of bickering going on. But this is a rom-com, so you can imagine what will happen next. And basically, Cameron, besides being her neighbor, he's also the coach of this little league team. He's also kind of incognito. He doesn't want people to know who he is. And I ended up giving the long game 3 stars because it was cute. I liked the setting. I liked the characters. They were lovable characters. It was easy to understand where these characters were coming from. But the thing is, this book just didn't hit a mark for me. I don't feel like I will reread this book. It was fine, I had fun, but there is nothing that stood out for me in this one in particular. I do plan on reading the sequel though, because it was a 3-star and it was just a good time. So that's all the 6 books I finished reading in June, and this is it for this video. If you liked it, leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel so you can get new bookish videos in your subscription box. And I hope to see you in another video very soon. Bye!